Greetings everyone. I am Rohit from Team ScholarGate. Welcome all the participants present here. Today we are here with another webinar on overview of drilling fluid
सर मेरा
technology.
वेबिनार स्टार्ट हो गया मैं आपको फोन करता हूँ बाद में
And the speaker of the session is Dr. Milap Ghosh sir, who is an IEDC accredited instructor and an accomplished writer. He is also a known petroleum engineering mentor. Now we will start the session. Take over, sir.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I think I have been already introduced, so there's no need to repeat the same stuff again. And I'm in this industry for 4 decades, especially on drilling fluids only. And I conduct several courses of drilling fluids, including IDC accreditation and cement slurry design courses also. And I do impart internship to all the engineering students of petroleum engineering and chemical engineering faculty. So we are going to discuss today for almost an hour about what drilling fluids are. And before you guys start focusing on the slides and the PPTs, let me quickly take you all through the history of drilling fluids as to how did drilling fluid evolve, what was the nature of drilling fluid in the beginning, and what happened at a later stage and all. Way back almost around 2 centuries ago, or maybe 2.5 centuries ago, when first drilling was resumed, and that was for the production of water at a very shallow depth, and plain water was pumped with the help of the pumps along with the drilling string, which is going to pick up the cuttings generated by the bit and it will bring the cuttings to surface. That is all. And that plain water was the first stuff which continuously kept on evolving and getting better and better for more precise information and more precise application as we keep digging deeper and deeper. So when we go deeper and deeper, we get a lot of other complications. And that is how to address all those complications, drilling fluid started evolving. It started taking care of more and more responsibilities on its shoulders as to how to drill a safe and trouble-free well. So that is the process of evolution of drilling fluid. And a generic description or a generic definition of a drilling fluid can be, a drilling fluid can be defined as a complex chemical entity of continuous liquid or gas phase and suspended, dispersed, dissolved, inorganic and or organic chemicals. And these chemicals are tailor composed to perform the specific function during the exploration and exploitation of hydrocarbons. It's a generic definition which is not too much technical jargon, and it has been framed with the objective that everybody is able to easily understand and appreciate what a drilling fluid is. So a drilling fluid will contain water as a continuous phase, or it can contain oil as a continuous phase liquid, or it can contain gas, air as a continuous phase. And there are going to be certain dispersed, suspended or dissolved solids which are going to complete the formulation of a drilling fluid. And what are those dispersed solids are going to be will depend upon what is the composition we want for what specific application. So this is a broad consensus on the definition of the drilling fluid. And we now take up the next slide. What is drilling fluid engineering? I have explained what is mud, but then there is a branch of petroleum engineering, which is popularly known as drilling fluid engineering or commonly known as mud engineering. So what mud engineering is all about? Mud engineering is actually an important component of the entire drilling campaign. Wherever there is a drilling, there is going to be mud. There cannot be drilling without mud. The mud can be of several types. It could be gas, it could be liquid, it could be an emulsion, it could be an invert emulsion, it could be a foam, it can be a froth, it can be anything, but there has to be a mud. So that what type of mud is going to be reused for what type of drilling in what type of rock is all included in mud engineering. So mud engineering is an important component of the entire drilling campaign and is actually a judicial blend of intuitive art and scientific facts. Guys, pay importance on this particular phrase, intuitive art and scientific facts, which means mud engineering is actually a combination of lot of technical knowledge and lot of experience, lot of wisdom, which we acquire when we actually run the drilling fluid system on the rig on a drilling location. So you can have a lot of technically sound mud engineers who have got enormous amount of knowledge, but they have never worked on a drilling rig. So they are 70% good as mud engineers. And then you can have a lot of other types of people who have got lot of experience. So got 30, 40, 50 years of experience of running the mud, but they never seen the college. So they have no idea about the technical, theoretical aspects of mud. So I would say that they are also 70% good mud engineers, but the one who has got good academic background and a good exposure to the actual drilling is the real mud engineer. And that is why it is a blend of intuitive art and scientific facts, which a mud engineer will imbibe in himself by knowing the basic facts of science and mastering the art of it by actually performing the job of running a mud on the rig. So you may be a PhD, you may be a DSc, you may be DPhil, you may be whatever. But if you have really not worked on a drilling rig, then you are not a complete mud engineer. In the same way, you may have spent 5 decades on the drilling rig as a mud engineer, but if you are not minimum graduate or postgraduate, then again you are lacking in terms of complete mud engineer. So that is mud engineering, and how the mud evolved, I told you. Now, as I have mentioned that there are several components, they could be inorganic, organic, suspended, dispersed. So what are those components? As I told, the first and the most important component is of course water. So water forms the basis of mud engineering, and we can say that water is the mother of all the components of a drilling fluid. Without water, you cannot prepare drilling fluid. Even if you want to drill with air, you can still need some water, which is going to create droplets, which are going to help in the movement of the air through the pneumatic systems and all. So you need water. Even if you are drilling through a surfactant, the surfactant needs some water in order to make it fluidic. You may be drilling with a foam, but in order to stabilize the foam, you need some component of water. So water is the essential component of all the types of drilling fluids. And then there is conventional tube wells. I'm talking about the water wells, where normally we use a specific type of clay, which is called as bentonite. Now, bentonite is again, it is a substance which is mined and it is not manufactured. There are mines of bentonite spread all over the world, and the bentonite is extracted from those mines, and then it is processed and it is made suitable for drilling applications. And since bentonite is derived from the mine, the quality of bentonite can vary from one to the other. There are several mines, and all those mines are basically having different yield of bentonite. I will now tell you what is yield of a bentonite. I'll give you a very simple example. Let's say we have 500 ml of water, and we are mixing 20 grams of bentonite in it. And bentonite has got the specific gravity of 2.5. So 20 grams of 2.5 specific gravity bentonite is going to give me a volume increase of around 8, because 20 divided by 2.5 is 8. So it's the mass divided by density is our volume. So 500 ml is my water and 8 ml is my bentonite. So strictly theoretically and mathematically, if we calculate the total volume, you should get 508 ml only. But in real case, if you dissolve 20 grams of bentonite in 500 ml of water, and then you mechanically agitate it and allow it to swell over a period of time, you will see that the total volume is more than 508. It could be 525, it could be 540, it could be any number. So this increase in the number of the volume of the total liquid is attributed to the swelling of bentonite. And bentonite has a property to swell in water. So when bentonite swells in water, it is going to increase the viscosity of water. And the water will become more viscous. And that is how the water will acquire the property of thixotropy. We will discuss a little more about thixotropy as we proceed further. But this is a very important terminology in drilling fluids, and I'm going to make it very clear to you what thixotropy is. But before that, let us see that what are the various functions of a drilling fluid. As we began that the drilling of the tube well, drilling of water wells, the first and the foremost concept that whatever the rock has been excavated with the help of a drilling bit, that rock needs to be brought back to the surface so that the drill bit can then excavate the next rock. If the same piece of drilled rock continues to remain there, then our bit is going to recut, re-drill again and again the same piece of cuttings. And that is going to be waste of resources, energy, and equipment. So we need to keep drilling the fresh rock, for which we need to expel the rock which has already been drilled. And that is what the bringing of cuttings to surface is the most important function of mud. Now, simply bringing cuttings to surface is not enough, because every rock has got certain built-in pressure in it. And that pressure is stabilized when the rock is in equilibrium with the entire matrix. But now what we have done here is that we have made a small hole in a huge kilometer spread rock. So this hole is going to generate the mechanical surface stresses. It's a very simple example that if I have 70 students which are packed in a classroom which has got only the capacity of 45 students. So those 25 additional students are occupying the class at the cost of squeezing everybody. And all the 70 boys are getting squeezed to some extent. And at the end of the day, all 70 are peacefully coexisting in that classroom. But now in that classroom, out of this 70, suppose 30 boys come out of it. So now there are only 40 boys. And these 40 boys are going to be more comfortable. They're going to stretch themselves. They're going to occupy more space, and eventually they will become comfortable. Exactly same thing happens in our rock. When we make a hole in the rock, we are just excavating a part of the rock. And this excavation of the rock is going to create mechanical instability in the rock. And this mechanical instability can result into the collapsing of the well which we have drilled. So how do we stop the well from collapsing? We have to exert enough pressure on the walls of the rock that the instability pressure is compensated. Which means if my rock is getting unstable by virtue of release of 200 psi pressure, then I need to have 200 plus psi pressure with my mud, which is going to act on the opposite direction on the walls of the wellbore, and thus the wellbore is kept stable. So that is what is called as exerting hydrostatic pressure to keep the hole integral. And this is done by imparting weight to the mud. And how do we impart weight to the mud? We are going to add certain weighing material. And the most common weighing material which we use in the industry is barytes. And chemically, it is barium sulfate. So you increase the weight of the mud by adding barytes, which is going to help to exert hydrostatic pressure, and the hole will remain stable. So this is also one of the function of the mud, that it has to facilitate the stability of the wellbore. And again, the mud has to lubricate and clean the area underneath the bit. We have to understand this, that we have a drill pipe and we have a drill bit which is connected at the bottom of the drill pipe, and we are applying weight on the bit from the external sources, which is going to move the bit, and this movement of the bit is going to produce torque. The torque is produced because of the strength of the rock. The rock will not allow the bit to cut, but the bit is getting weight from the top. So it is depending upon the hardness of the rock, we have to change the total weight which we have to apply on the bit. Ultimately, we have to drill. And as soon as we have cut the rock pieces need to be removed from that area underneath the bit. And this is done by mud. Mud will have tremendous jet velocity when it is coming out from the nozzles of the bit, and that jet velocity is going to lead into the drop in the annulus pressure, which is going to be transmitted on the rock by the mud. So mud is transmitting the hydraulic horsepower of the mud pump on the rock to churn it. And same way, this is going to create a lot of abrasion, and you need some lubricating agent to overcome this abrasiveness. And this lubrication is imparted in the mud by virtue of the liquid part, which is our water. I'm sure you all know that liquids are lubricating in nature by and large, but oil type of liquids are more lubricating. So if we have any problem in terms of excess torque or excess drag or anything like that, then we will need some better lubricating agent in our mud. But by and large, generally water provides enough lubricity for us to keep drilling under normal circumstances. So lubricating the wellbore and cleaning the area under the bit is also job of the mud. Same way, now you can imagine that when there is so much of abrasion, so much of resistance, so much of torque, then all these forces are going to lead to generation of tremendous amount of heat at the bottom. And this heat is generated, which needs to be dissipated from the bottom. We cannot allow the heat to accumulate at the bottom, because if the heat keeps accumulating at the bottom by the action of the bit on the rock, then the temperature at the bottom is going to increase tremendously, and it could be as high as enough to melt the drill pipe, which is not a good sign. So we have to make sure that the heat which is generated due to the action of the bit on the rock is continuously dissipated, and it is brought back to atmosphere where the heat is going to get released in the entire atmosphere. And this job is done by mud again, because mud is going to heat up itself. It is going to absorb the heat which is generated, and that absorbed heat will make the mud hot. And when the hot mud reaches to the surface, it is going to be in equilibrium with the surface temperature, and there is going to be a drop in the temperature of the mud. So mud is going to heat up and then cool. So heating up and cooling of the mud are two simultaneous processes which go on while the drilling is going on. So it is an important function of the mud. And mud is also good conductor of electricity, because mud contains water, and you all know that water contains hydrogen ions and hydroxyl ions. Hydrogen ions have got a positive charge and hydroxyl ions have got a negative charge. So wherever there are negative and positive charges, definitely there is going to be a conductance. And this conductance is going to lead to the generation of electrical signal. And these signals are captured by mud and brought back to surface. And the signals are originated from the top of the well with the help of logging tools. There are specialized type of open hole logs which are created. And when those logging tools will generate an impulse of the current, which is going to pass through the reservoir, through the pore spaces, and it is going to travel inside the reservoir up to a certain depth, and then it is going to reflect back. So when the signal is reflected back, then it is the mud which is going to pick up that signal, and it is going to transmit it back to the surface. And at the surface, this signal is then converted into a digital value, and you can read what is the permeability, what is the porosity, what is the water saturation, what is the connate water composition of the rock, what is the pore pressure inside the rock, what is the fracture gradient, what is the overburden gradient, and what is the breakout pressure. All those numbers you can work out with the help of the signal which are transmitted to surface by mud. So this again, all these are some of the important functions of the mud. Now mud has got certain more important functions. Like I would say that this is probably one of the most important function of the drilling fluid, because when we are circulating the drilling fluid inside the well, then there is enough pressure exerted with the help of the mud pump, and this pressure is going to increase the annular velocity of the mud. Velocity of a liquid is the distance traveled by unit time. So I can say that if my mud is traveling at a speed of 20 meters per minute, then the annular velocity of my mud is 20 meters per minute. However, now imagine that there are several situations when we do not run the mud pump and the mud is static. So when the mud is static, when it is not moving, then it has got a special property that it will acquire gel strength. And this acquisition of gel strength in the static condition is going to help the mud to suspend the drilled cuttings within itself, and the cuttings are not going to drop back to bottom. And that is the property of a drilling fluid. Now, this static mud, which has held the cuttings in suspension, as soon as we start the circulation of the mud, then the mud is going to again become mobile. And when the mud again becomes mobile, then the gel strength of the mud is broken. And now the cuttings are going to be lifted out of the hole with the help of the pressure which is generated by the mud pump. And this mud pump generated pressure is going to increase the annular velocity of the mud. And we are going to formulate the mud in such a way that this mud is going to not only flow out of the hole, but it will carry all the cuttings with itself. So that is what is the ability of the mud to bring the cuttings back to surface and to hold the cuttings in suspension. And that property is the thixotropy. So the thixotropy of a mud, in simple definition, is the property by virtue of which a mud is going to acquire gel strength when there is no pressure on it, and the mud is going to lose that gel strength when there is a pressure applied on it. So there is a very popular term we call it as a shear thinning. So the mud is a shear thinning fluid, which means whenever there is a shear stress applied, it will become thin. And when that shear stress is withdrawn, it will become thick. So that is the beauty of the mud, which it imparted to it by the gelation tendency of the mud, and it is called as thixotropy. And of course, you have to stabilize the wellbore by keeping the forces, and the mud is going to form a filter cake along the walls of the wellbore. And this filter cake is like plastering the wellbore. Like many times when we go for the painting in our houses and all, we use a brush which is going to plaster. And this type of plastering effect is imparted by mud to help the rock remain stable. And that is what again is the job of a mud, by forming the filter cake. And all of you are aware about the buoyancy forces and all. And the buoyancy forces are actually those types of forces which are going to keep the drill string straight. And the mud being a liquid, it is going to help to keep the drill string straight by supporting partially. So these are all various important functions of the mud. As such, actually, there are another 20 or 40 odd functions of the mud. And if I start talking about all the functions of mud, then 1 week, 1 month, 1 hour is going to be very small. So I'm going to stop here. What are the functions? Because these are the important functions of mud. Now, for a mud to perform these functions, there are certain specific properties. And these properties are, first property is mud weight. As I told you, we need barite to increase the weight of the mud, which is going to keep the hydrostatic head under control, and the wellbore will remain stable. Questions? Keep your questions ready with you, and when the session is over, then I'm going to answer all those questions one by one. So mud should have mud weight, mud should have the rheology and thixotropy. Thixotropy I have explained to you, and the rheology I will explain to you in more detail when we talk about the various rheological models of the mud. And then we have the mud should have the ability to hold the water in it. Like our 80% component of the water of the mud is water, liquid. And the remaining 20% are different solids. Guys, these 80 and 20 numbers are only here for the sake of convenience. A mud can contain more than 20% and less than 20% solids also, depending upon what is the requirement of the well. So the numbers are notional. Don't go by the accuracy of the numbers. The numbers are shared here just for you to understand what actually what actually mean when I say that ability to hold the water in it. So now the remaining, the 20% solids and the 80% liquid in the mud should be so spread equally uniformly throughout that at every stage of the well, the concentration of all the solids is equal, which means we cannot have a patch of mud where the solids are 30% and the water is 70%. And there's another patch where we have the solids are 40% and the liquid is 50%. And then we have last patch where we have got only 10% solids and 90% liquids. That type of disproportionation of the distribution of the liquid and the solid part of the mud is not a good sign, and it is not acceptable. So we need to have the ability of the solids in such a way that they're able to hold the entire water uniformly spread throughout the matrix of the mud. And the lifting capacity, as I told you, lifting capacity is by virtue of the annular velocity of the drilling fluid, which is a function of the flow rate of the drilling fluid. Higher the flow rate, more is going to be the annular velocity. And higher the annular velocity, better is going to be the lifting capacity. It's very simple. And mud is going to provide a conducting medium, because conducting medium is going to help the transmission of signal, and conductive medium has got several other functions also, which I'm going to come up as we discuss further. And mud is also going to provide alkalinity. Alkalinity of the mud is by virtue of the pH of the mud, which we keep most of the times more than 8, and somewhere between 8 to 10 is the normal range. Now, pH has got two benefits. First is that it is going to provide a non-corrosive atmosphere, non-corrosive environment to our drilling campaign. And we don't want any corrosion to take place while we are drilling. So alkaline mud is going to overcome the problem of the corrosion of the mud, because corrosion happens during acidic medium only. If the pH of the solution is less than 7, then we are prone to corrosion. So we add enough alkalinity increasing agents in our mud to keep the pH more than 8, 8.5, 9, something like that. And then alkalinity has got another advantage, that our bentonite, which is going to swell in presence of water, the total swelling capacity of bentonite increases tremendously with the increase in the pH. So when you increase the pH, the alkalinity, it is going to increase the yield of the mud. And that is advantageous for our drilling operations. And then we have controlled activity. Controlled activity is a concept which I will touch when we are going to talk about the oil-based mud. So these are the properties. Now, let me tell you, what is viscosity? Guys, here please remember that viscosity and rheology are two different terms. Please do not use them interchangeably with each other. They have got a separate identity, distinctly different properties. They are not comparable with each other. So let me first start with what is viscosity. Viscosity, by a layman's language, I can say that it is the resistance provided by the liquid to flow. When you apply certain shear on a liquid, the liquid is in a state of equilibrium in the static inertia, and it will oppose the movement. So we keep increasing the shear stress till the shear stress reaches to a stage where it has overcome the frictional forces between the two layers of the liquid, and the layers have started moving past each other. This is what exactly I have displayed in the presentation here. Like you have two layers, and both the layers are placed at a distance one above the other, and I am applying force on one layer. So one layer is going to move over the other layer, and this is the distance between the two layers. Now you can easily understand that if the distance is more, then the frictional forces are going to be less, which means if the layers are kept apart from each other, then the layers will move more freely. Whereas if the layers are just kept one above the other immediately, then probably they may not, or they may move only with the application of high shear stress. So shear stress is the force applied, and shear rate. Shear rate is the rate of movement of the liquid with respect to that particular shear stress. Again, I'm giving you some numbers to understand. If I apply a total shear stress of 200 psi, then suppose my liquid is moving, my layer is moving at a rate of 2 meters per minute with by virtue of the application of 200 psi. So that is shear stress and shear rate. Now the viscosity can be defined as a ratio of shear stress to shear rate. So when a fluid is flowing, the force exists in the fluid that opposes a flow. This force is known as the shear stress. It can be thought of as a frictional force that arises when one layer of the fluid slashed by another. Since it is easier for the, yes, again, please pay attention here. This is a concept which you need to understand because this concept is very useful for the rheology. Now, there are, let us say, thousands of layers of clay which are stacked one above the other. And when I apply a shear stress, then these layers are going to get away from each other. However, these layers are not going to move at the same velocity. Some layers will move faster, others may move a little slower. So this difference in the movement of the layers with respect to each other is the origin of the rheological features of a drilling fluid. And rheological features of the drilling fluid are a measurement of the rheological properties. Right now, I'm talking about viscosity. So in case of viscosity, the layers are going to move at the same rate. All the layers will move together at the same rate and there are no changes in the angular velocity of any of these layers. That is our water, plain water. Any plain liquid which has got no solids suspended in it is going to behave like a viscous fluid, and this flow behavior where the shear stress and the shear strain, whatever curve that I've shown you, that curve here, right? This curve, shear stress and shear rate are directly proportional to each other. And if you draw the shear stress and the shear stress, then the line is going to pass through the origin. And this is going to be the viscosity. So you got the concept of viscosity here. And in common man's language, sometimes we got used to it that if the mud is more viscosity, then we can say mud is thick. And if the mud has got low viscosity, we can say mud is thin. But thick and thin are basically not the scientific way of describing the state of the mud, because a thick and thin are just subjective numbers. They don't mean anything. If I say that a guy is fat and the other guy is sleek, then if I compare the fat guy with another guy which is still fatter than him, that this becomes sleek and that becomes fat. So we have to assign a specific number, and that quantifiable number is going to be the viscosity, which has got several units as I've shown here. So I have a model which was first described by Newton, and it is called as a Newtonian model. Newtonian model is applicable for those liquid solutions which obey the shear stress, shear law, direct proportional law. But remember, our drilling fluid is not a liquid. Our drilling fluid has got liquid and lot of solids in it. So the drilling fluid is not going to follow the Newtonian model. And the distortion of the Newtonian model is described by non-Newtonian model. So we'll now talk about non-Newtonian model. And as I told you that the drilling fluid is going to contain liquid and lot of solid particles in it. So what happens when we apply a shear stress on a drilling fluid? Initially, the first application of the shear stress on a drilling fluid is going, the particles, the solid particles which are there in the mud are going to bump into one another, which means the layers of the clay, the polymers which we have mixed, the deflocculants, the flocculants which we have mixed are going to collide with each other, and there is going to be a zigzag movement of these solid particles. So the shear stress which is applied is going to be consumed by the action of the collision of the solid particles, and this collision of solid particles is an internal process. But as long as the particles keep bumping with each other, the liquid will not move. So I have applied certain shear stress, but this certain shear stress is consumed by all the solid particles of the mud, and the mud is actually not showing any movement at all. So that is the feature of a non-Newtonian fluid. In non-Newtonian fluid, the shear stress and shear strain are not directly proportional to each other. The shear stress is always going to be more and the shear rate is always going to be less. There is going to be a delta difference, and this delta difference will depend upon how many solids are there in our mud. If you have more number of solids in the mud, then you will have higher loss of initial shear stress before you make the mud flow. And this, if these particles, now the particles are going to crisscross with each other till they all stack up in the form of a vertical layer which is parallel to each other. And this type of placement of layers vertical to each other happens when we have applied certain specific shear rate, and that is called as the gel strength of the mud. How much is the gel strength of the mud? The gel strength of the mud is the equal to the shear stress which is applied for the first movement in the physical movement in the fluid. And that is what, now if the particles are long, then they are going to bump and collide for a longer time. And if the particles are spherical in nature, then you can understand that the spheres are going to move more easily in comparison to a rectangle. So that is what I am trying to show here, that the particles will move more easily depending upon their size, depending upon their shape, and also the mud, when it is inside the hole with a drill pipe in the center of the hole, then a part of the mud is going to be attached with the wellbore, and the other part is going to be attached with the drill pipe on the outer side. So that layer of the mud which is attached with the drill pipe and the wellbore will not move. Irrespective of any shear stress, this layer is going to remain static. And the static layer of the mud against the wellbore is our filter cake. You remember I told you the job of mud, it is going to form a filter cake. So that filter cake is by virtue of the solid static layer on the wellbore. So these are some of the superficially, just I'm touching upon the aspects of rheology. I'm not going into great detail because we got only 10 more minutes left for 1 hour. So I'll probably stretch to another 15 minutes to explain to you what are the various rheological models of a drilling fluid. A rheological model is actually the description of the relationship between the shear stress and shear rate. Please remember this, never forget that if you are using a pure liquid, the liquid can contain solid which is completely dissolved in it. Like if I add 5 grams of sodium chloride salt in distilled water, then the entire salt is going to be completely dissolved in my water. And the water with salt is going to behave like a Newtonian fluid, where the shear stress and the shear rate are going to be same. But in that same water, if I add some bentonite, then bentonite is going to swell in water, but bentonite will still have its own solid component in it. And this type of dissolved or miscible bentonite will not follow the viscosity relationship of shear stress and shear rate. It is going to follow the non-Newtonian model where the shear stress and shear rate are not proportional to each other. So if they're not proportional to each other, then what's the relationship between them? That relationship is described by various rheological models. And most of the drilling fluids are non-Newtonian. This model does not describe the flow behavior. Newtonian model is not going to describe the flow behavior. So there is no single rheological model which can precisely, accurately describe the flow characteristics of all the drilling fluids. Every rheological model has got some limitation in terms of its ability to describe the complete flow behavior of the drilling fluid inside the annulus. And there are lots and lot of work, even today, a lot of people are doing in order to understand and replicate what exactly is happening inside the whole downhole under temperature and pressure conditions. But there are certain very popular models. One of them is, of course, Bingham plastic model. Another one is power law model, and another one is modified power law models. These are some of the important. I'm going to briefly touch upon them because I'm afraid we are running out of time. Let me try as much as I can. Okay. Now, Bingham was the first scientist who visualized, and he said that the initial stress, shear stress, which is applied on a drilling fluid till the drilling fluid does not move, is going to be the gel strength of the mud. And that is described if a typical consistency curve of a drilling fluid is made with the rotational viscometer data, then you will get a non-linear curve. Non-linear curve. Unfortunately, I am not having that graph here, but I can tell you when I say non-linear curve, then let me come back to this. Now, in this case, the line intersects at the bottom, and this is a Newton. In non-Newtonian model, the line will probably intersect from somewhere here, and it will follow a different path. And this change in the path is the indication of the relationship between the shear stress and shear rate at different rotations. And that is basically measured with the help of a rotational viscometer. A rotational viscometer is going to read the rheological number converted into a digital value on a rotational viscometer, which is rotated at different RPMs. The most popular RPMs which are prevailing in the industry is 600, 300, 200, 100, 60, 30, 6, and 3. So these are the different RPM ranges, and the mud is going to be rotated in a rotational viscometer, which is containing a stator and a rotor. and the mud is going to be moving in between the rotor and the stator, and depending upon the rheology, depending upon the gel strength of the mud, this is connected with a wire which has got a torsion, and that wire, when it moves, it is going to reflect and read the analog numbers of respective RPM, and that number is going to depict the model, the rheological model of a drilling fluid. So what Bingham postulated, that if the mud starts moving, then subsequently the shear stress and shear rate are directly proportional to each other. That was the postulate of Bingham. So according to him, once the liquid starts moving, then it is going to behave like a Newtonian fluid. But unfortunately, when we studied the details and the rotational viscometer values of the mud, we found out that the postulate of Bingham was not realistic. He was true up to a point that yes, initially there is going to be a change in the flow pattern, but this flow pattern change will again continue to keep changing depending upon the type and the composition of the mud. So the beauty of the flow behavior of the mud is that at no stage of circulation, the mud will have the same annular velocity. It will keep on changing depending upon the size of the hole, depending on the annular size of the hole, depending upon the composition of the hole, depending upon the flow rate with which we are pumping the hole, and depending upon whether the flow pattern is laminar or turbulent. So there are hundreds of variables which are basically going to affect the final flow pattern of a drilling fluid, and Bingham was not able to address all of them. Then there was another effort made by more people, and they came up with a number of flow behavior index and consistency index. Flow behavior index and consistency index are basically indicative of the variation in the flow profile of a drilling fluid at a low shear rate and at a high shear rate. So these numbers are basically popularly denoted as N and K values of a drilling fluid, and they compensate partly for the anomalies of Bingham plastic fluid. So we can predict the rheological feature, the rheological aspects of a drilling fluid more accurately with the help of a power law model. But again, power law also suffers from several disadvantages. And guys, we are almost going to be very close to 1 hour. So I regret I cannot go into those details. But what I can tell you is that then there was another model postulated, and we call it as a modified power law model. And it was postulated by Herschel and Buckley. So people also know this as a Herschel and Buckley model. And Herschel and Buckley postulated that if the though our mud is going to become gelled, it will act as if it is a solid, but within that solid itself, initially when we are. So this is all about the various rheological models, and see, these are various types of mud. You have the water-based mud, you have the oil-based mud, you have foam-based mud, you have solids-free mud. And these are the ratios of the averages of which type of mud is used in what mud weight range. And these are some of the important weighing materials which we use in our drilling fluid. As I told you, weighing agent is our barite to impart mud weight. You have viscosifiers like bentonite and certain polymers. You have fluid loss control agent where to keep the fluid loss under control. You have alkalinity control agents which are going to maintain the pH of the system. You have got dispersants which are going to help to reduce the rheology of the drilling fluid. There are several cases where we need to actually reduce the rheology. So we need dispersant. We have certain deflocculants, dispersants, and we have certain rheological conditioning additives. And one of the most important feature is we need certain shale inhibitors in our mud, because the tendency of the cuttings to swell in the mud is one of the biggest cause of the non-productive time in the oil well drilling. And that is because of the ability of the shale to swell in the mud. So that is where a lot of shale inhibitors have come into the market, and scavengers, lubricants, defoamers are all having a specific application in specific case, and emulsifiers, wetting agents, rheology modifiers are all basically the components of oil-based mud. We don't use any emulsifier in the water-based mud. We don't use any wetting agents in the water-based mud. And then of course, corrosion control agents, as I told you, that if the conditions are severely corrosive, like if a rock is containing carbon dioxide, if a rock is containing hydrogen sulfide, which are all corrosive in nature, then we need certain additional corrosion protection in our mud. So that is what corrosion control agents are there. And these are some of the states of it. Actually, I am regretting that this 1 hour is too small a period. I mean, in 1 hour, I cannot basically even compile the entire minimum basic concepts of a drilling fluid. There are various states of mud: flocculated, deflocculated, aggregated, dispersed, and pseudo dispersed type stages of the mud. And you have several flow pattern, how a mud is going to flow when it is inside the annulus. When there is a force applied, but that force is not actually making any physical movement in the mud, then it is actually used up in keeping the solid particles separated from each other. So the force is still there, but the mud is not moving. That is why we call it as a static flow. And once all these layers are separated, then the mud is moving like a very small plug. And that is a plug flow. But when we further increase the flow rate, then some of the layers of the clay will travel faster than the other layers. So we'll have a conical path within a cylinder. And that is called as a laminar flow. Then we have turbulent flow, where the laminar flow is overcome. And for our whole cleaning, for bringing cutting back to surface, the most ideal flow is actually turbulent flow. So whenever situations permit, we should always try to achieve turbulent flow in our drilling fluid. And then beyond turbulent flow, we have eddy currents. It is actually of academic importance. I just included so that you all know that there is a concept called eddy currents. In real case, eddy currents has not got too much of a significance, but there is a significance on this Reynolds number. Reynolds number is a dimensionless value which will indicate whether our flow pattern is laminar or turbulent. And that is how we can increase our flow rate and find out at what specific flow rate we will have the turbulent flow. And that is where Reynolds numbers help us. And when critical velocity is actually nothing but annular velocity only, but it is that particular annular velocity where my flow pattern will change from laminar to turbulent. Suppose the flow pattern changes from laminar to turbulent at 63 meters per minute. Suppose, then my critical velocity is 63 meters per minute. That is what a critical velocity means. Now there are dozens of different types of water-based mud systems. I just named them, some of them. And we have then developed oil-based mud system where the continuous phase is going to be oil. And depending upon what type of oil we use, we have several types of mud systems. And what are the advantages of the oil-based mud system? Guys, I am already 1 hour. So scholar guys, somebody should tell me, can we continue or we have to stop now?
Sir, we can continue, sir.
Okay, I will try to give a very brief understanding of what an oil-based mud is. Oil-based mud was actually developed because we were facing a lot of problems in terms of shale instability in the water. And this shale instability in the water was as a result of the unsatisfied charges present in the clay as well as in the water. So if we get rid of these charges, then those reactions are going to stop. And that is why we selected a liquid additive which is not having any charges. You all know that the oil does not have any negative or positive charge on it. Oil is a non-polar solvent. So when you have a non-polar solvent, then it is not going to react with the shale, and that is how it's one of the biggest advantages of the oil-based mud. And oil is obviously more lubricious in comparison to water. So it will provide better lubricity, it will provide better temperature stability, it will provide a gauged hole, it have a tolerance, more solids can be tolerated in the oil-based mud, and you will have a reduced filtrate invasion. There are host of benefits of oil-based mud, but please be very clear that oil-based mud may be giving you many advantages, but oil-based will come along with their own set of disadvantages also. So it is not that if we use oil-based mud, then all the problems are solved. It is only that problems are going to be different. So we'll have a better handle on different types of problems. So these are some of the disadvantages of an oil-based mud. Oil-based muds is very costly, and you need lot of mechanical shearing to prepare an oil-based mud. And the detection of kick. Kick is an unwanted entry of gas and oil inside the wellbore when we're drilling. And the detection of kick is very accurate and good in the water-based mud, but in the oil-based mud, it's not like that. Oil-based mud, the tendency of the kick detection is drastically reduced. And oil being hazardous, there are a lot of pollution and environment-related restrictions on it. And there is a particular complication with the mud, we call it as a mud loss. And oil-based mud has got a higher tendency of mud loss when compared with the water-based mud. So that again is a disadvantage, and you cannot dispose oil-based mud. Oil-based mud has to be preserved, stored, and it requires a lot of money, inventory to store oil-based mud. And the solid control equipment do not perform very efficiently in presence of the oil-based mud. And there are many other disadvantages of the oil-based mud. But this is a generic composition of an oil-based mud. An oil-based mud will contain continuous external oil phase. It will contain internally dispersed brine phase. It will contain an emulsifier. This emulsifier is going to imbibe and bring both these mutually insoluble substances together. So emulsifier is going to keep these phases held tightly with each other. And you need lime to activate the emulsifier. And you will have, you remember we were using bentonite in our water-based mud, but in oil-based mud, you cannot use bentonite. You have to use organophilic clay. And that is another different type of clay. And you need certain fluid loss control additive. And oil-based mud also suffer from the initial decrease in the rheology, for which we have to compensate by adding certain rheology boosters. And we need to oil wet all the rock, all the particles of the mud. And we need bridging and sealing agents which are going to overcome the problem of mud loss. Because as I told you, oil-based mud suffer from mud loss. This is generic. And what is going to be a generic composition? How much of base oil, how much of brine, how much of emulsifier to add. And this is a generic number, guys. This is not a yardstick. Numbers can change depending upon the conditions of the hole. So please do not quote that these are the Bible numbers or like that. They are just to give you an idea as to what can be a rough formulation of the oil-based mud. There is a special type of water-based mud. We call it as a high-performance water-based mud. High-performance water-based mud and normal water-based mud, there's not much of a difference. The only thing is high-performance water-based mud has got a more resistance to shale inhibition. So it is going to give us extra time without any shale swelling, and we can complete our well without any wellbore instability related problems. That is why we call it as a high performance water-based muds. And these are some of the advantages, because by virtue of the multi-pronged approach, the shale inhibition feature is greatly enhanced, and you have a better lubrication, which will help faster ROP. Sometimes this ROP can be as good as the oil-based mud, and sometimes it can be even better than that. So these are some of the advantages, and environmental related aspects are eliminated greatly here, which are prevailing in the water in the oil-based mud. We are comparing high performance water-based mud with the oil-based mud, because oil-based mud is definitely better than the normal water-based mud. Then when a high performance water-based mud can come in close to the performance with the oil-based mud with good shale inhibition and better composition. And cementing job is always a problem in the oil-based mud. You will always have to change the wettability of the rock, and sometimes the wettability is not correctly changed, then the cement is not going to set. Cement sets only when there is water. Cement is not going to set in oil. So whenever you carry out any cement job, you have to make sure that you have a surfactant which is going to change the wettability of the rock after the drilling has been over, if we are using an oil-based mud. And high performance water-based mud is not having so much of a tendency of loss as we have in the oil-based mud. Now, this is a very recently developed, very important and very futuristic part of the drilling fluid. And I am not able to go through the entire, but I'll give you just 5 or 10 minutes of description. What is happening, that as the name itself says, deep water drilling, that means it is going to be a drilling on the offshore location where there is a water depth which is beyond normal limit. Like in a normal offshore jackup rig, we will probably have a water depth around 100 meters, 120 meters, 170 meters, or at the most, maybe we can go up to 200 meters, 210, 220. Then it becomes a limit. Beyond that, our normal jackup rigs cannot drill for various mechanical reasons. Then there are many deposits of oil and gas which are buried deep down inside the ocean at a depth of below 3 kilometers of subsea bed. So you find oil and gas deposits below 3,000 meters in the sediments of the ocean. And drilling on such locations is a huge challenge. So by and large, if you have to drill in a location beyond 300 meters, then it is classified as deep water drilling. And if the water depth is beyond 1,800 or 2,000 meters, then it can be also called as an ultra deep water drilling. So these demarcations are actually very loosely defined and can differ from place to place. And the problems of the deep water drilling fluid is basically the column of seawater is going to exert extra pressure on the seabed, on the sediments of the below the seabed. And the sediment just below the seabed are very, very soft, unconsolidated, and large and porous in nature. And that is why it is very difficult to drill through such a rock. And you have got to travel the mud almost 2 kilometers. So your annular velocity, your flow rate are going to be extremely high. So you need lots and lots of additional mechanical arrangements for simply being able to circulate the mud. And that is again a challenge. And there are a special type of situation where we have natural gas hydrates. Natural gas hydrate is the future source of energy, and lot of work has been done on natural gas hydrates in India, as well as basically it is the solid where the water molecules are going to absorb gas, and the water and the gas combined at a very, very low temperature and high pressure convert into a solid plug. And this type of solid plug is going to trap almost 1:164 units of natural gas. Understand, if you have 1 liter of water, it is going to trap 164 liters of your natural gas. So that is the potential of the untapped natural gas hydrate we have. And this natural gas hydrate is capable of solving all the energy problems of the humankind if it is properly tapped. So these are, and drilling through the natural gas hydrates is one of the big challenges. And then we have another category, high temperature, high pressure drilling fluid. If the temperature at the bottom goes beyond 150 degrees centigrade, then it is HTHP conditions. And HTHP conditions, again, there are a lot of drilling related issues. And what are the special considerations? We have to keep a very close watch on the loss gain feature. Every time when we are drilling, we have to make sure that there is no fluid which can enter from the wellbore, and there is no fluid which is getting lost into the wellbore. We have to perform the fingerprinting. Fingerprinting is a special operation which is characteristic of HTHP, and the description is going to take a long time. So I'm just introducing you, and there are so many things. Let me tell you guys that each point, each chapter here can become a one full project. Like deep water drilling is one full project. HTHP drilling is one full project. Reservoir drilling fluid is one full project. Loss of circulation is one full drilling project. Natural gas hydrates is another project. Oil-based mud is another project. So there are so many topics to learn, and 1 hour I can only name them. And then there is a special class of drilling fluid we call as a reservoir drill-in fluid, where we formulate the mud which is not going to damage the rock. And when we are drilling through the gas and oil-bearing pores of the rock, then we have to use the reservoir drill-in fluid. So this is all I have for today, and I am really not too much satisfied because I have only briefly just touched upon the various aspects of the drilling fluid, and drilling fluid as such is a big ocean. The deeper you dive, more precious pearls you can get out of it. But I'm going to stop here, and the session is open for question answers. Anybody has got any questions?